let's get into our headlines for today. Kicking off, of course, with TMC. We're joined by Efosa Aluyi, who's, of course, head of global investments at Sankore Investments. Efosa, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Rotus. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. TSMC, let's start in Asia. The drop in revenues, what did you make of that development there?
I mean, I think it's essentially on the back of, the drop, or fall off, if you will, in consumer demand for electronics, really, particularly in the aftermath of the, the COVID pandemic and also supply chain disruptions that we had, in the wake of that. That essentially has been the challenge, with TSMC's results. I mean, TSMC is essentially the largest, advanced chip maker in the world. Recall that just about a year ago or so, we had this shortage of chips that we're essentially dealing with, right? But right now that demand is basically falling off for consumer goods, and that's also impacting, the movements, if you will, for the demand of the sort of chips that TSMC makes. So that essentially is the reason for that drop that we've seen. I think what we're likely to then see, obviously, is that as demand recovers really for consumer electronics, we're certainly going to see a pickup, in the demand for the chips that TSMC makes, and obviously revenue will certainly get bolstered by that. So I think it's just a blip in its journey, if you will, not anything significant in terms of how it would impact its performance going forward. But I just think that it's just a slight drop that we're seeing in consumer demand for electronics at this time, and that's what's really impacting its revenue.
Thanks for that. Let's quickly jump to wheat. We've seen the price climb over the last few days. I guess, in line with what's been going on with the grain deal and so on. What do you make of what's been happening there?
Well, I think it wasn't exactly completely surprising, really, that Russia pulled out of that deal. It took quite a lot of effort to get them, to the table and, be in on that deal. And even through the deal, you always had comments, from Russia, sort of threatening to pull out at different points in time. So I wasn't surprised that they eventually did pull out. But I think that, we're seeing the impact of that essentially reverberate through, wheat prices. Just yesterday, wheat prices were up 11%. I think, they essentially ratcheted up the ante by designating the fact that any ship that they saw going through the Black Sea towards Ukraine would be a legitimate military target, so that essentially upped the ante in terms of, what's going on there. I mean, just for a bit of context, that Black Sea, about a quarter of global wheat supply goes through that Black Sea, so that grain deal was extremely important. So the fact that it's been pulled off has very strong implications for, wheat prices. And it's important to also note that wheat is used in a broad variety of stuff, from a lot of staples, bread, pasta, and all of that. So it's not just the wheat prices. You're also going to see that in the prices of these commodities or these foodstuffs that are made through wheat. And obviously, it's probably going to have an impact on the global inflation that, seems to be cooling right now. So again, really remains to be seen how long Russia stays out of the deal. The hope is that with the intervention of Turkey, the United Nations, it probably will come back to the table. Like it said, it wants for its conditions to be met for it to come back to the table. So fingers crossed, and we'll see how things pan out on that front.
Thanks for making that point, especially when inflation is just decelerating around the world. Yeah. Not Nigeria, though, but this is now happening. Still on Russia, speaking of pulling out of the BRICS summits next month in South Africa, there was that whole thing, his arrest warrant, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Is that a blow, I guess, to the Kremlin as far as how they've been posturing leading up to this summit? Yeah,
you could look at it like that, really. And it was just the wise thing for him to do, right? There's this really strong man posture that he's got. And, you would expect that, he would probably just, call the bluff and attend. But I think it was a wise decision that he, attends via video conference, while Sergei Lavrov attends in person, because there is an arrest warrant out for him from the ICC. South Africa is a treaty member and is under obligation to actually effect his arrest if he does come to Joburg. So it could become a very complicated type of situation. Obviously, he probably doesn't want to put South Africa in that situation. Also, for himself, he doesn't want to get himself, entangled in that kind of, situation, really. So I think it was just a wise decision to attend virtually.
So look, so we're talking about Russia now with BRICS. We're talking about Russia with wheat. I mean, long term, it looks like Russia is still going to be a major catalyst for how metrics in the global economy are impacted. For the foreseeable future, doesn't seem to be an end to this.
I mean, when it comes to global geopolitics, even before that, the invasion, right? Russia was always a major player, right? At the end of the day, if you look at the global economy, we've always had this ideological battles, right? And it continues to this day. And Russia and China are essentially on one side of the aisle, while the United States and the West are on the other side. So with the invasion, all of that really is then significantly ratcheted up, right? So I think that with the invasion playing out, as far as geopolitics is concerned, that situation will continue to be a major catalyst.
I want to quickly get to earnings, starting with Tesla. As far as the way the market responded yesterday to their numbers, what do you make of the earnings for the second quarter?
So, the earnings quite decent, right? They delivered about 466,000 cars. The plan is still to deliver about 1.8 million cars this year, which is really strong. We've seen, significant ramp up in production for Tesla. Although for Q3, that number will drop a bit because of maintenance that will basically go on around its gigafactories. But I think one of the major points of concern was the fact that margins dropped at Tesla, and that was just on the back of the fact that you had price cuts and you also had incentives. Really, one of the things that Tesla tried to do during the quarter was to kind of drop prices to try and maintain market share. So all of that typically affected the mix and then obviously impacted its margin. So those are some of the areas that investors were concerned about. Also in Cybertruck, there's not much traction as people would have expected on that front. That also had an impact on investor sentiment, really, and that's what's really really playing out for Elon Musk. Really, it's a race to autonomous driving, and that would be the game changer for Tesla.
But finally, just very quickly, Netflix, they also released earnings yesterday. Subscribers jumped really quickly. Can you give us your thoughts on them?
So Netflix's result underpins the positive initiatives that it took, particularly coming into this year. Number one, crackdown on password sharing, and number two, that ad model that it created. So we've seen, significant traction on that front. It added about 5.9 million subscribers. We're also seeing that password crackdown is going to spread to other regions, and we certainly will see the positive impact of that, going forward.
Efosa Aluyi, head of investments at Sankore, head of global investments at Sankore. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights on Global News.